Emperor Huan took the throne in 146 AD. The real ruler of China was not the emperor, but the regent Liangji. Liangji controlled military appointments, government offices, and access to the throne itself. Everyone in empire knew there were two emperors, and also which one had the real power. In 159 AD, Emperor Huan secretly allied with 5 palace eunuchs and launched a coup against Liangji. Imperial troops surrounded the regent's mansion, forcing Liangji and his wife to commit suicide. The government then confiscated his fortune. Records describe such huge quantities of gold, silver, jade, pearls, luxury goods, servants, livestock, and property that state warehouses struggled to hold everything. The coup should have restored imperial authority, but it created an even bigger problem. Emperor Huan rewarded the eunuchs who helped him seize power with noble titles and influence over government appointments. Powerful positions were increasingly sold to the highest bidder, allowing wealthy but incompetent men to buy office and recover their costs through bribery and extortion. When Confucian scholars criticized the corruption, Emperor Huan sided with the eunuchs and launched the partisan prohibitions, arresting and banning many of the empire's most respected officials. This weakened the government's pool of capable administrators while corruption spread throughout the bureaucracy. Large landowners continued expanding their estates while small farmers lost land and became dependent tenants. Tax burdens increasingly fell on ordinary people while powerful elites used their influence to avoid obligations. Many of the conditions that later led to rebellion, warlordism, and the dynasty's collapse grew significantly worse during his reign. In 1908, both the reigning emperor, Guangxu Emperor, and the dominant political figure, Empress Dowager Cixi, died within a day of each other. When Puyi became emperor in 1908, he was only 2 years old, so the Qing dynasty was not ruled by an emperor in any real sense. Power was held first by court regents. In 1911, the Xinhai Revolution broke out across China. Military units and revolutionary forces began abandoning the Qing court. In 1912, the 6-year-old Puyi was forced to abdicate, ending more than 2,000 years of imperial rule in China. Puyi's political value did not end with the fall of the Qing. In 1932, the Japanese installed him as ruler of Manchukuo, the puppet state created after the invasion of Manchuria. In 1934, they crowned him emperor of that state, but the Japanese army controlled everything. The Japanese occupation also supported some of the darkest crimes of the Second Sino-Japanese War. Manchuria housed the infamous Japanese military research program known as Unit 731, where prisoners were subjected to biological experiments that killed thousands of victims. Chinese civilians were compelled to work in mines and construction projects under brutal conditions. Many died from exhaustion and malnutrition. After Japan's defeat in 1945, Puyi was captured by the Soviets and later sent back to China, where he was imprisoned and re-educated. In 1850, Emperor Xianfeng inherited one of the largest empires in the world, but his reign quickly became a period of rebellion, foreign invasion, and national humiliation. Within a year, the Taiping Rebellion erupted under Hong Xiuquan, who claimed to be the brother of Jesus Christ. What began as a local uprising soon grew into one of the deadliest wars in human history. By 1853, the Taiping rebels had captured Nanjing, one of China's most important cities, and turned it into their capital. Qing armies suffered repeated defeats as entire provinces fell out of imperial control. The rebellion eventually killed tens of millions through warfare, famine, and disease, while the Qing government struggled to stop its advance. As the crisis worsened, local officials such as Zheng Guofan raised their own armies because the imperial military had proven ineffective. These regional forces became more powerful than the emperor's own troops, weakening central authority and increasing the influence of provincial strongmen. While the Taiping Rebellion devastated China, Britain and France launched the Second Opium War in 1856. Modern European armies repeatedly defeated Qing forces, capturing forts and advancing toward Beijing. In 1860, as foreign troops approached the capital, Emperor Xianfeng abandoned Beijing and fled north to Rihe rather than directing the defense himself. After entering the capital, British and French forces looted and burned the old summer palace, one of the greatest imperial complexes in Chinese history. Thousands of priceless treasures, artworks, books, and cultural artifacts were stolen or destroyed. The Qing government was then forced to sign humiliating treaties granting foreign powers new privileges and concessions. When Xianfeng died in 1861 at only 30 years old, the Qing Empire had suffered some of the greatest disasters in its history. In 712, Emperor Xuanzong inherited the Tang Dynasty during one of the most powerful periods in Chinese history. Under his early rule, the empire is known as China's Golden Age. The capital, Chang'an, became one of the largest and richest cities in the world, attracting merchants, diplomats, and scholars from across Asia. As the years passed, Xuanzong increasingly withdrew from government affairs and devoted more attention to palace life. He became deeply attached to Yang Guifei, one of the most famous consorts in Chinese history, while her relatives gained powerful positions at court. Her cousin, Yang Guozhong, rose to become chief minister despite fierce opposition from many officials. At the same time, military governors on the empire's frontiers accumulated unprecedented power. The most dangerous was Liu Shan, a general who commanded massive armies along the northern borders. Xuanzong trusted him heavily, granting him control over several frontier regions and tens of thousands of troops. In 755, Liu Shan launched a rebellion against the Tang government. His forces rapidly captured major cities and marched toward the imperial capitals. The rebellion shattered the stability of the empire and triggered one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. As rebel armies advanced, Emperor Xuanzong fled Chang'an with his court. During the retreat, imperial soldiers blamed Yang Guozhong for the disaster and killed him. They then demanded the execution of Yang Guifei, whom they believed symbolized the corruption and favoritism that had weakened the government. Xuanzong was forced to order her death. The Liu Shan rebellion devastated China. Major cities were destroyed, farmland was abandoned, trade collapsed, and millions of people were killed through warfare, famine, and disease. The Tang dynasty eventually survived, but it never fully recovered its former power and marked the end of its golden age. In 1505, Emperor Zhengde inherited the Ming dynasty at a time when China was firmly established as one of the world's greatest powers. Instead of focusing on administration, he increasingly devoted his reign to personal entertainment, allowing palace favorites and eunuchs to gain influence over government affairs. One of the most powerful figures during his reign was the eunuch Liu Jin. He gained enormous control over the imperial administration, manipulated appointments, and built a vast network of corruption. Officials who opposed him faced imprisonment, torture, or execution, while those willing to pay bribes could secure promotions and favors. Liu Jin accumulated such immense wealth through corruption that, after his downfall in 1510, authorities reportedly discovered enormous stores of gold. He was eventually executed. Rather than strengthening imperial authority, Zhengde often avoided court responsibilities altogether. He spent long periods away from official duties, created a private pleasure complex known as the Leopard Quarter, and filled it with entertainers and favored companions. The emperor also became known for bizarre behavior that undermined the dignity of the throne. He sometimes traveled outside the capital in disguise, ignored established court procedures, and created a fictional military identity for himself called General Zhu Shou. Officials were even required to submit military reports and petitions to this invented persona despite knowing it was the emperor himself. In 1519, the Prince of Ning launched a rebellion against the Ming government. Although the revolt was defeated relatively quickly by loyal officials, Zhengde insisted on personally leading a campaign afterward so he could claim credit for suppressing the uprising. By the time Zhengde died in 1521 at just 30 years old, his reign became a symbol of wasted potential. In 1620, Emperor Tianqi inherited the Ming dynasty at a time when China faced mounting military and financial problems. Instead of focusing on government, he became obsessed with carpentry, spending hours designing tables, cabinets, pavilions, and wooden models while state affairs accumulated unanswered. His obsession created a power vacuum that was filled by the eunuch Wei Zhongxian. Because Tianqi rarely involved himself in administration, Wei gained direct control over access to the emperor. Wei soon became the most powerful man in China. His supporters filled government offices across the empire, while critics were arrested, tortured, exiled, or executed. Temples were built in his honor, while living officials referred to him with titles normally reserved for rulers. In some regions, local authorities erected shrines to Wei before constructing schools or public works. The main victims were the Donglin scholars, a group of officials who exposed corruption and demanded reform. In 1625, many were rounded up and imprisoned. Several were tortured to death, including Yang Lian, one of Wei's fiercest critics. While officials were hunting reformers, the Ming military suffered repeated defeats against the rising Manchus in the northeast. Just 1 year before Tianqi took the throne, nearly 100,000 Ming soldiers had been destroyed at the Battle of Saru. Instead of rebuilding the army, court politics became consumed by factional purges and personal vendettas. Corruption spread throughout the government as offices were sold, promotions were bought, and military funds disappeared into private pockets. Money desperately needed for frontier defense was diverted by officials. When Tianqi died in 1627 at only 21 years old, he accelerated the decline of one of China's greatest dynasties. In 290 AD, Emperor Hui inherited the Qing dynasty, but he suffered from severe developmental disabilities and was unable to effectively govern one of the largest empires in the world. Real power immediately fell into the hands of regents and court factions who fought to control the throne in his name. His reign became infamous for a story recorded in Chinese histories. When told that people were starving because they had no grain to eat, Emperor Hui reportedly asked, "Why don't they eat meat porridge?" The remark became a symbol of how disconnected the imperial court had become from the suffering of ordinary people. Empress Jia Nanfeng's consolidated control over the court and eliminated political opponents. In 299 AD, she arranged the murder of Crown Prince Sima Yu. The assassination helped ignite the War of the Eight Princes, one of the most destructive civil wars in ancient Chinese history. 8 powerful Jin princes raised armies against one another, claiming to act in the emperor's name while fighting for personal power. Massive armies marched across northern China, devastating farmland, cities, and trade routes. The war lasted for years as princes imprisoned, deposed, murdered, and betrayed one another. Emperor Hui himself was repeatedly kidnapped and controlled by rival factions. The ruler of China became a political prisoner whose seal and authority were used by whichever warlord happened to hold him. Hundreds of thousands died during the conflict, while many more were displaced by famine and warfare. Entire regions were left devastated as armies looted grain supplies and stripped the countryside of resources. The chaos severely weakened the Qing dynasty's ability to defend its frontiers. As civil war consumed the empire, non-Han tribal groups along China's northern borders expanded their power. Several leaders took advantage of the disorder to establish independent states inside former Qing territory. In 304 AD, the Xiongnu leader Lu Yuan founded the state of Hanzhou, beginning a wave of invasions and rebellions that the weakened Qing government struggled to contain. More frontier states soon emerged as imperial authority collapsed across northern China. When Emperor Hui died in 307 AD, the War of the Eight Princes had opened the door to invasions that would eventually destroy the Western Qing dynasty. In 168 AD, Emperor Ling inherited the Han dynasty at just 12 years old. Real power quickly became concentrated among palace eunuchs. As Emperor Ling grew older, he relied heavily on these eunuchs instead of experienced officials. The most powerful group became known as the Ten Attendants. Under Ling, government offices were openly sold for money. Wealthy families could purchase positions regardless of ability, while officials who bought offices often recovered their investment through bribery and corruption. When honest officials criticized the growing corruption, many were dismissed or excluded from government service. In 184 AD, these tensions exploded into the Yellow Turban Rebellion. Led by Zhang Ju, the movement attracted hundreds of thousands of followers who believed the Han government had become hopelessly corrupt. The Han military struggled to contain the revolt, forcing the government to grant greater military authority to regional commanders. Local generals raised their own armies, gained independent power bases, and became less dependent on the central government for support. Although the rebellion was eventually suppressed, the dynasty never fully recovered. Regional warlords retained their armies, and imperial authority weakened further with each passing year. When Emperor Ling died in 189 AD, within a few decades, the empire fragmented into the Three Kingdoms era. In 604 AD, Emperor Yang inherited the Sui dynasty after the death of his father, Emperor Huan. Many historical sources accused Yang of plotting against his elder brother, Crown Prince Yang. One of Yang's most ambitious projects was the Grand Canal, a massive waterway linking northern and southern China. The canal eventually became one of the greatest engineering achievements in Chinese history, but its construction required millions of laborers. Huge numbers of peasants were conscripted to dig canals, transport materials, and build infrastructure, while many died from exhaustion and harsh working conditions. At the same time, Emperor Yang launched enormous palace construction projects. New palaces, roads, gardens, and imperial residences consumed vast amounts of labor and resources. Heavy taxation and forced labor obligations placed increasing burdens on ordinary families throughout the empire. In 612 AD, Emperor Yang launched the first of three major invasions of the Korean kingdom of Goguryeo. Historical records describe an army numbering more than 1 million men, making it one of the largest military campaigns of the ancient world. The campaign ended in disaster as supply problems and military defeats devastated the Sui forces. The most famous defeat came at the Battle of Salsu. Goguryeo commander Yulji Mundiak lured a large Sui army deep into enemy territory before attacking during its retreat. Of the roughly 300,000 soldiers sent on that expedition, only a small fraction reportedly returned. Despite the catastrophe, Emperor Yang launched two more invasions of Goguryeo, in 613 and 614. These campaigns consumed enormous resources while producing little success. More soldiers died, more taxes were collected, and more laborers were drafted into military service. As military failures mounted, rebellions erupted across China. Peasants, soldiers, local officials, and regional leaders revolted against the government. Entire provinces fell into disorder as the Sui administration struggled to maintain control. By the late stages of his reign, much of the empire was in open rebellion. Even members of the elite abandoned the dynasty as confidence in the government collapsed. In 618 AD, Emperor Yang was assassinated by his own officers during a coup. By that point, the empire was already disintegrating. The Sui dynasty collapsed the same year. In 210 BC, Qin heir Shi became emperor after the death of Qin Shi Huang, the founder of the Qin dynasty. According to ancient accounts, the powerful eunuch Zhao Gao and Prime Minister Li Si concealed the emperor's death while traveling and forged an imperial decree forcing the rightful heir, Crown Prince Fusu, to commit suicide. Qin heir Shi gained the throne through one of the most notorious succession conspiracies in Chinese history. Once in power, Qin heir Shi became heavily dependent on Zhao Gao, who gradually gained control over the government. Officials who questioned Zhao Gao's authority were removed, imprisoned, or executed. Fear spread throughout the court as loyalty became more important than competence. One of the most famous incidents involved Zhao Gao presenting a deer to the emperor and calling it a horse. Officials who correctly identified the animal as a deer were punished, while those who agreed with Zhao Gao survived. The episode became a symbol of how intimidation and dishonesty had come to dominate the Qin government. In 209 BC, just 1 year after Qin heir Shi took power, the Xuanzong and Wu Guang rebellion erupted. According to tradition, a group of soldiers facing execution for arriving late due to flooding decided to rebel rather than accept certain death. Their uprising quickly inspired revolts across China. While the empire was collapsing, Zhao Gao turned against his allies. He falsely accused Prime Minister Li Si of treason, leading to Li Si's execution through one of the Qin dynasty's brutal legal punishments. By 207 BC, rebel armies were advancing toward the Qin heartland and confidence in the dynasty had collapsed. Zhao Gao feared being blamed for the disaster and forced Qin heir Shi to commit suicide.